I'm going to go ahead and get started. So welcome. Go ahead, next slide. Welcome. Today, your hosts are me, Ben Cornell, co-founder of EdTech Insiders, and we have an amazing team behind the scenes that make all of this happen. Sarah, Sharon, and Jen. If you want to partner with EdTech Insiders, please reach out to Sharon. You can reach her at sharon@edtechinsiders.org or info@edtechinsiders.org. Next slide. I am so honored to have this incredible group of speakers. We have Leah, who is the Chief Operating Officer of ASU Prep Academy. We have Joseph, ISTE and ASCD Chief Innovation Officer. Justin, who's founder and CEO of Starbridge, and they are our host today. So thank you so much, Justin, for putting this together. Sanam, OU Education Services, she's the CEO. And Jennifer Frentress, the Superintendent of San Carlos School District. As you can tell from the backgrounds here, we have a range from basically K to gray represented here, and people who are day-to-day in the seat running school and educational operations, all the way to people shaping policy and impacting how AI in education shows up. Next slide, please. If you want to learn more about EdTech Insiders, there's so many ways. We've got our Substack, we've got our LinkedIn, we've got our podcast, we've got our YouTube. But please, I urge you, we need subscribers to help keep paying for this incredible content. So if you go to our Substack/subscribe, you can become a subscriber. And for just $15 a month, you can help make this wonderful programming happen. Next slide, please. For this session, we love your feedback. If you scan this and you give us any feedback, it helps us think of what our planning is coming up. So now, before I do our first question with our illustrious panelists, I want to throw it over to Justin just to tell us a little bit about what Starbridge is all about. Justin.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Really appreciate it. I'll keep it fast for everyone. Nice to meet y'all. I'm Justin, founder and CEO of Starbridge. For those of you that aren't familiar with Starbridge, we're an AI-powered platform that has all this interesting data about schools. So who are the people that work at schools? How are they doing AI adoption? What products have they purchased in the past? And we're really fortunate. We work with, over the last 12 months, 300 plus companies like Panorama, Clever, Magic School, School AI, Instructure, Canvas, many of the leading kind of ed tech companies. And now also on the school side, folks like at Dallas College, where we really help them to build workflows on top of these data sets. One of the most interesting ones, and what got us excited about this, is we track AI adoption for every school in the country. And so really excited today to kind of share on that, and also just have a really interesting conversation about the state of AI in the education space. So thanks, Ben.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Justin. Well, today's conversation, what makes it different and unique is we're not talking about the theory, the promise. We're not talking about what could be 5, 10 years from now. Although we'll touch on that a little bit, we're really interested in what's going on today. How are we taking this potential and putting it into practice? And so with each panelist, we're going to be talking about examples of where is the state of AI right now? What's actually working and happening? What's not? And where are we headed? And so I want to start with our K-8 leader, Jennifer Frentress, superintendent in San Carlos Schools. And let's just start with the first question for all of our panelists. What was that aha moment when you were like, oh my gosh, this is something different. This is really happening. So I'll start with you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. Jennifer Frentress. San Carlos School District is a TK8. It's on the Bay Area Peninsula, heart of Silicon Valley. So my aha moment happened at an AI and education summit at Stanford, where I heard from Michael Frank talking about these GoPro cameras he put on toddlers' heads to learn about language. And he created all these videotapes of what they were looking at and what they were saying. And this promise of looking at big data versus bespoke little studies to learn to solve a mystery around child development and language development was super exciting to me, and I saw all the possibilities.
That's awesome. Leah, how about you? What was your aha moment?
I think for me, it was when we started using Magic School and we started to see what teachers could do with lessons and move so quickly that it was like, well, this can be for this. I'm operations. What can it take over for us? And it's just been like, I can't learn enough about it. And that's when you know it's not going away.
That's really fascinating. you made the connection when you saw it in the teaching and learning space too, of like what it could do also with school operations. I think that's the power. Joseph.
Yeah, so I think the what really struck me is I was talking to an educator and he said, AI gave me my Sunday nights back. And when I heard him say that and realized that you could create those kinds of efficiencies, I'm like, there's no way this isn't going to be everywhere if you can actually give educators time back. And I hope we do a lot more with AI than just give educators times back, but that was the switch flipping for me.
And can you tell us a little bit about what ISTE and ASCD is?
Yeah, absolutely. So ISTE ASCD is a nonprofit. We have it's a membership organization. We have about 100,000 members, which include instructional leaders, K-12 educators, higher ed researchers, and we also put on an amazing conference every year, draws 15,000 people last week of June, called ISTE ASCD Live. If you've never been there, people describe it as the Disneyland of EdTech. Over 1,000 different ways to learn, and all from other practitioners. And then we also do a ton of work in professional learning in districts and individually. And we are involved in helping hundreds of thousands of educators get up to speed in AI through a bunch of work that we're doing.
Awesome. And Leah, I should have also clarified, a lot of people see the Arizona State University in your name, but can you tell us a little bit about your work and the school and programs that you're running?
Sure. I'm part of the ASU Prep Academies, which is the sponsored charter network within the state of Arizona by ASU. And we not only serve over 10,000 students in the state of Arizona between our in-person and our digital programming, but we also serve districts across the country who may not have capacity to teach certain topics. And that's where our sort of deep digital pool comes into play. So we are very fortunate to touch tens of thousands of students every single year.
Wonderful. And then now in the higher ed space, Sanam, talk to us about Oklahoma University Education Services. What is that? Tell us more. And then also, what was your aha moment?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ben. So I'm Sanam Raza. I'm the CEO of OU Education Services, and we are a separate entity from the University of Oklahoma, and we have been founded by the university to build and expand capacity and capability to deliver degree programs online. So this would be from all of the OU campuses across all verticals, colleges, and disciplines. So we here handle instructional design, course development, all of the services that support an online non-traditional student. So they have an excellent experience, and we encourage retention and completion rates. So that's what we all do. Ben, I want to say my aha moment was actually talking to individual faculty members across the university who were eager to show me how they've improved their productivity through AI. I remember sitting in a room with a global affairs faculty who showed me an AI produced avatar of himself basically giving a video lecture. That's when I'm like, all right, this has come. It's arrived, it's being used. So really, I think it was when, I there was clear signs of faculty adoption across the board was quite fascinating. And then, I had faculty members showing me how they converted a chapter in a textbook into a podcast using Notebook LLM, and they were so excited about it. So yeah, that was my aha moment.
That's great. I mean, those are the moments where it really comes to life. Justin, what about you? It inspired you to start a company. Like, what was your aha moment? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I did my first ed tech company at a college called CourseDoc, which grew to become one of the larger kind of higher education software companies. And, toward my end of my time there, I just started to feel this sense of, oh, schools have this, this opportunity to do so much good in the world. The right partnership between a business and a school can then make magic happen. And with the current state of technology, it oftentimes felt like implementations would drag on for forever, regardless of what the technology was. And that the promise of this technology, in a lot of cases, could create back office efficiencies, but I found oftentimes it was removed from that student. And I think what changed for me was when I started to see what the advent of AI and some of these companies like you mentioned that were taking off, I realized when I talked to school leaders, they were like, no, we love these products.
Mm.
And that got me so energized just to know that we're in this sea change of technology where the promise of technology is finally starting to be realized through AI. And I just knew I had to kind of go all in.
Yeah, it's such an interesting case too, where AI is both the subject and the object. Like your company using AI to better understand how people are using AI. I find so many meta examples of that. There has been a lot of excitement about the promise, but what's really going on? I want to talk about from pilots to practice. Where are you seeing promise of AI utilization in your context, and where are you not? And how will these things grow from limited pilots to broader, widespread practices? Now, some of you have rollouts of entire AI initiatives, and others, it's still an experimental phase. So I'd love to just hear where you're at. So open floor, anyone feel free to jump in.
I'll jump in. The thing I'm really excited about is the way I see the teachers who were piloting tools originally, like Magic School, sharing with their colleagues how they are able to personalize learning for all of the learning differences they might have in their classroom and language differences, and the ways in which these individual pilots then are getting other teachers excited and on board and implementing, again, to get their Sunday nights back. And as a former English teacher, to really feel like I'm making all of the learning accessible to everyone. I think that that's what I think we're seeing right now, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I think we've come from fear of AI to a lot more embracing of AI because people are seeing some of this. When you watch a student learn how to ask critical questions and leverage AI for a project instead of trying to ban something that's supposed to, they'd be cheating, it's like eye-opening. They are embracing the project and really learning way more than they would have when they were just off doing research, trying to write papers. So there's a lot more engagement with students, and to Jen's point, with teachers and students and between teachers themselves.
I think I'm really inspired when I see educators using AI in a way that is really different than something they could have done without it. So I have my one educator who they're teaching philosophy, and they have uh, the assignment is for the students to learn about a philosopher and then have AI take on the role of that philosopher, have a dialogue with them about free will, and then turn in that discussion, a record of that discussion to the instructor, right? And so from the student's point of view, they're learning about a philosopher, and then they're talking with the philosopher, and then the evidence of that is being sent to the instructor. And that is just not something that could have been done in that class previously. And so it's really exciting to see those kinds of use cases. And it makes you realize that we can push beyond things we've done before. There's a lot of people who are using AI to accelerate what they're already doing, which is awesome if it gives you your Sunday nights back. But not everything we're doing should be accelerated. If you make 100,000 true false questions in a minute, you haven't necessarily made education better. So I get hopeful when I see that crossover into more transformational uses.
I think when we look at, Ben, as you were saying, pilots to practice in higher ed, so not only are we seeing the use of AI on the instructional side for faculty productivity, I mean, that's usually the first place that I've seen it start, but a lot of it is also on the kind of operational dynamics within the institution. So we see a lot of use of AI to reduce enrollment friction. So AI reading transcripts and doing those evaluations to speed up admissions. There's multiple kind of practices around early risk detection on the retention and completion side of the house, and really being used to expand advising capacity. So it's pervasive across the institution. Certainly, we're seeing segments of it, but it's being embraced to really expand operational capacity within the higher ed environment as well, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and Justin, you've done some research at Starbridge, taking macro data, just like looking at, is this really going from pilot to practice? In higher ed, your study found that 75% of higher ed organizations mention AI in their planning documents. 61% have purchased an AI-related tool, and the top institutions are pretty much clustered on the West Coast. On the county level, so, civic government, 70% mentioned AI in the last 2 years, 61% use an AI-related tool, and a lot of positive mentions. And then on the K-12 side, 60% discussed AI at board meetings in the last 2 years. 68% have purchased AI tools. So what was interesting to me about some of this data is like, we're hearing more talk about it in higher ed and in counties at like a leadership or governance level, but actually K-12 is the more aggressive adopter of AI tools, which I was shocked by that. What are some of those insights that you're seeing?
It's such a great question. I think that you mentioned some of the data. I'll kind of carry on some interesting facts. We're seeing that education technology companies that start from zero today, on average, are growing about 3 times faster, as in their growth cycles are about 3 times faster in the AI space than the sort of traditional ed tech companies that came before them. And so it's really interesting. You're seeing this explosive adoption across the board. I think some of the trends as we looked at the data that were most interesting is A, this is kind of the first time, at least since maybe the dot-com era, where at that sort of executive level, board level, CIO, superintendent, provost, president level, AI is the adoption of AI and putting budget toward this amorphous category of AI is actually more common than not in institutions and schools. And so what that's created is an environment where, schools are actually going out and sort of seeking these innovative solutions, which is very uncommon from an education. Usually, as an ed tech company, oh, I need to figure out how to sell. Now you see all the time, and we see this in our data. There's 1 or 2 new schools a week that in their board meetings say, "Hey, we're looking to start AI pilots. Come talk to us," right? So it's this really unprecedented kind of change that's going on, and I'd say that we're only seeing that continue to accelerate.
I will say with our panelists and in our prep too, I think we can all acknowledge that ChatGPT and generalized AI is really commonly adopted, but none of you have actually brought those general models up as an example of what you've seen implemented. And I wonder, why is that? Like, students are using those things personally, teachers are using those things personally, but generally speaking, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you all have steered more towards purpose-built education-related AI. Why is that? What's driving that? Are there fears driving it? Is it actually opportunities? And just help us understand how you're thinking about that. Just because I know all of the, by the way, OpenAI and Anthropic both just announced new positions to lead their education teams. So I think a lot of people are trying to understand, is this going to be a generalized AI moment, or are these actually moments for education AI companies and organizations? What are your thoughts?
I think in higher ed, Ben, it's a lot of it is around purpose-built, speaks to guardrails. Speaks to that, FERPA regulations would have been taken into account. It speaks to the kind of student experience that higher educations are looking to create. It speaks to academic integrity, and I can see the slant towards more purpose-built versus, generalized AI that don't really quite resonate with that type of a promise that sits well within, higher education administration.
And I think there's I agree with that. Certainly we need guardrails in K through 12, not just for legal reasons, but also for ethical reasons. And so we're definitely looking at specialized LLMs that are attuned to those laws and practices. But I think there's another reason we're looking at more specialized applications, which is if you just think about the fundamental function of an LLM is to give you the most efficient answer that's most accurate and complete as quickly as possible. And that is not how you learn. Learning requires productive struggle. And if AI takes all of the struggle out of learning, then it's not helpful. And so even students who have access to non-specialized LLMs, the ones that are learning with them are asking it to put guardrails on itself, saying, don't tell me the answer, help me think through this. And so the specialized LLMs are designed out of the box to help the student think through something rather than giving them the answer. And I think we're going to see I think that specialization is going to become the norm.
I agree
Leah,
with my, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I was going to say, I agree with my colleagues. And I think because there was widespread adoption of ChatGPT for personal use, that the skepticism that's already prevalent in educators was pretty high. And how do we use that tool? And we have cases of like the debate teacher having kids put their debate in there and, ask the ChatGPT to, take apart their argument. But I think for us, it's about a scope and sequence of AI literacy for both teachers and for students. And there's some nice things out there that we're starting to explore, and that could help us begin to bridge that gap between skeptics who are avoiding it and adoption of that as another tool in our toolbox.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, a couple things that are brought up here and that we should probably dive more into. And Leah, I'm curious to get your thoughts too, but are we moving faster with AI interfaces and supports for our instructors, our educators, where we're not worried about cognitive load? In fact, we're actually trying to create more efficiency. Or are we? By the way, there's a lot of controversy around, shouldn't teachers review student work? I don't know. But then, how we think about moving it forward with learners. And then, Jennifer, your point is, it's learning about AI or learning with AI. Those are somewhat distinct. So, Justin, when people kind of do this open door, we want people to come pilot AI with us. Sometimes it's not that specific.
Yeah.
Leah, what's been your experience, and where do you think things have really been hitting, and where have you been slower, especially when it comes to generalized AI models versus education specific?
Well, I agree with Jennifer and others in that really the problem was ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all of that. We all were using it independently. People had it. And so we really were looking for things that could scale across like the whole teachers or something versus individual accounts for people versus maybe monitoring use of these other tools. And so ultimately, by looking for these tools, we have to have transparency into it. And so that's what sort of led us to other AI adoption stuff is we still have an accountability to see what students are doing and make sure they are learning the concepts and are getting ready for the real world. And just opening up an AI or something may not allow teachers to see that. And there's some really interesting stuff coming out with groups like Grammarly and others that is like a joined interaction between students and teachers and stuff. And so we're just we always will invest in teachers and students first, but then it sort of became unavoidable that like, wow, this is really helping us with other operational efficiencies that allow us to better serve teachers and students kind of behind the scenes. So for us, it's just been sort of well-rounded. Districts will always prioritize students and teachers first before they prioritize other business needs.
Can you give an example of something that you've implemented and how it's kind of the before and after, Leah?
Yeah, Conmigo, we're lucky enough to do a program with SalCon, with our Conworld school. And so early adopters with Conmigo, and we had such good results with that. We've now pushed it out to our schools this past year, and we are seeing early strong indications of stronger math and stuff like that. But I think in the early stages, some of these tools, you had to help develop it with people. And now these tools are more developed. So those are things where a lot of schools need something that they can lift and go, not that they have to spend a lot of time doing it. So I'd say Conmigo was one. And then we already mentioned Magic School. Yeah.
Yeah, Justin, what does the data say about where people are using this and this like generalized LLM versus using ed specific tools?
It's a great question. I'll share maybe some practical advice on both sides. So on sort of the school leader side, I was talking to a CIO a little while ago, and they made this really interesting point, which is they were like, they explained to me, they said, I look at ChatGPT, I look at Claude, I'm never going to invest. And the reason why I'm not going to invest is because these markets are too dynamic. So I don't know what the future is going to hold 3 months or 6 months from now. And you think of, these enterprise procurements in schools, usually you're thinking about a business partner for years and years and years. And so the advice that the CIO gave that shared with me, which I thought was pretty smart wisdom, is you really got to be a partner to these companies more than ever before, right? You're not, when you're investing in one of these tools, you're not just investing in the current state of things. Like 3 months from now, you're going to be working with a different product, and if it's a great company, a different, a bigger team because of how fast these companies are growing. And so the practical advice I'd sort of give on the school side, and what I'm seeing, is that schools want to have these deep relationships with companies. And I think that's a part of the reason why you're seeing more specialized adoption, because these innovators that are EdTech specific products are really sitting down saying, let's talk about the use cases, let's work together on this, which I think is really magical. Practically on the company side, what I would say is, we see, from customers, crazy growth from customer, like I met Magic School and School AI, Flint, Brisk, Scout Schools, higher ed also, folks don't talk about as much, but companies like, Element 451 and College Vine and Viruses Degrees, there's so many of these that we work with that are growing so quickly. The practical advice I'd give to companies is, I think that right now we're seeing a couple of use cases really take off. Obviously, teaching and learning on the K-12 side, and on the higher ed side, I'd say that enrollment's been actually a really major driver, what we see from our purchase data. But I'd say that there's so many more niches of K-12 administration, of the student success lifecycle, of higher ed administration that are untapped. And so it's really interesting now seeing this next wave of these companies that are tapping into these spaces and creating these novel AI use cases as well.
Yeah, that resonates with me, but it's also really hard then to understand where things are and the trajectory of where they're going, and how do you select a tool versus, I think a very rational stance might be wait and see. Like in 6 months, if it's going to get that much better, let's get more information. Joseph, you and I had dinner last month, and we were bemoaning the state of procurement. And it's like, how do you write an RFP where you say, like, here's what I want today, but I also want what's coming in the future. And then how do you pick, and in K-12, as Justin, as you mentioned, there's all of these products that AI is kind of a horizontal technology in that it can do one thing, but it's actually best at doing many things. And so you're like, how do I compare a Brisk and a Magic School and a School AI and a Kira Learning? And, if I were to do an RFP, that's a really tough rubric. Joseph, what are you seeing and how people are thinking about procurement? And maybe you can also talk a little bit about some of the ratings and outcomes that ISTE does, just in terms of impact, because I think all of us are kind of rethinking what even procurement and partnership looks like.
Yeah, so I mean, I have tons of sympathy for anybody who's trying to procure AI in a school right now. One, for those of us who remember the .com boom, it feels really similar to have so many companies burst out all at once, and they're all doing something really cool and advanced, and you have no idea if they're going to be here in 3 months. And so I think if I'm procuring for a district, I've got to consider the longevity of what I'm investing in. And I think as a result of that, a lot of procurement is shifting towards the larger players because there's a better chance in the minds of the person buying that they're going to be around. I think another phenomenon that has really struck me is the degree to which Google is watching what these startup companies are doing and then incorporating that functionality into their offering. And it's different than it's been in the past, where someone might have a patent or something that protects their methodologies. In this case, nothing protects your methodologies, right? So if company A figures out a really cool way to give feedback, and Google or Microsoft or somebody decides to copy that, they just copy it. And so I've been watching Google's appetite for adding new education features, and it's vast. I think when it comes to choosing, I think the thing that I would recommend people stay away from is, these wrapper companies where essentially they're just putting a layer on top of an LLM. I think the ones that are really serious about what they're doing are building real technology. And so that's either the large players or it's the new startups that have a sophisticated tech stack. I think those are the ones that are going to be around. The other thing I'll just mention, so ISTE has something called the ISTE seal, and it's a quality seal that we offer to products that go through a vetting process with us, and then we award the seal if they meet our quality standards. And we are right now in the process of developing quality standards for AI, and we'll be folding that into our seal. And on the one hand, hopefully that's good news because then something like the ISTE seal can help you find your way through. On the other hand, we're having a heck of a time writing these standards because there's only so much you can know about an AI tool, right? And so,
and it's changing so fast that it's really a snapshot in time. Yeah.
Yeah, and so 6 months from now, that thing that we gave the seal to, is it the same thing? And so we don't know the answer to that yet. We're still feeling our way forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something I hear from a lot of people. The upstart companies show incredible features. It's got a wow factor. But then we also see these incumbents that are fast follows. And it could be Google, but it could also be, major players that have been around for a while have really kicked into gear with fast follow. Quick plug, you can see in our notes, our EdTech Insiders map. We actually had to create a second map. So we had an AI, generative AI and education map. We created a second map with incumbents. So we have native AI companies and then incumbents and all the use cases of what they're doing, which further muddies the water. And I would just encourage people to also check out ISTE's grad profile for the AI future. What we are seeing, Justin, outside of AI adoption is outcomes-based contracting. And there is this sense of like, okay, rather than feature by feature, because features can be developed so quickly, let's think about the outcomes we're going for and who the best partners are. Coupled with this, we're also hearing a lot about implementation. So last week we had Kristen DeCerbo from Khan Academy, Khanmigo, and they did a research RCT in India where they implemented Khanmigo, and it was a horrible failure. That was about 2 years ago. And instead of like packing up shop, they said, let's try it again, but with an implementation coach on site. And all of a sudden they saw incredible gains. So there is this question of how do we make our organizations resilient and effective at implementing AI? Sanam and Leah, you are in kind of innovative zones within larger university structures. How has that given you like more flexibility to grow? How are you thinking about being the cutting edge of innovation? And how does that innovation bleed back to the main university or main organization? Either of you, feel free to jump in.
I actually want to shout out to Sanam because she actually recently wrote a LinkedIn post that talks about it's so little to do with like the technology and so much more about the process and the system. And this is an exact example. No one can ever implement any one thing without there being implementation experts. The change management involved, the policy around it, all of it, it's still all there, kind of staring at us in the face. And so I do think that everything we've done, we pilot it and we make sure that we have people who understand it so that we can properly take it out in mass and at scale, because we are just now getting to the, I'd say, at scale of use of AI within our particular set of networks. But how we can start to do that faster. And this is where I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to something you said, Joseph, about procurement. We like are ready to buy, but something we're seeing in ed tech and SaaS-based systems as a whole is they want a 3 to 5% increase year over year, but a lot of schools are very limited in a state budget. So for example, in Arizona, we only get 2% more per year. So we're very confined in what we can do with our budget, but we want to implement these tools. And so So that is one thing, like when procurement and for these companies and stuff is in K-12, we don't quite have the same capacity to grow our budget by that much every year. So anyways, back to the implementation and everything else, it is so much about the process, the change management, the communication, who you get out, who are the heroes, who are the cheerleaders, right? Teachers need that as much as teachers provide that for kids. And so we have a small group of people, we call ourselves the Maize group, MAIZE, you get it? And they do a wonderful job, lunch and learns and lots of AI push out there. Sanam?
Yeah, no, I think you've hit a nerve here. Most definitely, and I think you mentioned this, Justin, in your research, you saw a lot of higher ed education institutions talking about AI strategy. Yet when we look under the cover, budgets don't realign to that at all. You don't fund it, I don't know how the strategy is ever going to, manifest itself. Process connectivity, our core problem continues to be lack of shared data. Without that, it's just going to be pilots. And, in certain, like, especially in the enrollment cycle and the retention cycle, the impact of AI tools is very measurable. So we can measure it right away. Those can get scaled, but it's just not the same way. So if we talk about a space where, a student experience is personalized from their enrollment experience to how they learn to their retention, everything has to connect, like the student information system data, the learning management system, the application system, and that is a gap. So, I really agree with what Leah said. I mean, without a connective tissue across the organization, attempting to bring these cross-functional components together, it's really less about the technology than it's about the whole sort of cross-functional process and system working. And that's what we're really pushing hard towards at OU and how we kind of now launch and build. And this is when AI systems compound. Without these kind of processes, we're not going to see the compounding impact of these. And I mean, I'll share a little bit about, Leah, how you kind of talked about AI companies. I think AI companies specializing in higher ed need to think about different types of selling models and not copy SaaS. Whether
Also,
it's price inflation or no, just start with a pilot when we know that unless certain circumstances don't exist, a pilot will be very hard to scale. So we really want to think about what is going to work inside a higher education institution and not a universal SaaS set of selling practices is where I'll leave that.
I mean, I just want to call out, we are nerding out about procurement and implementation. It like doesn't get more EdTech insiders than this. So I just want to send a lot of love out to this group of fellow education nerds. In K-12, I think this often looks like teacher professional development. This looks like, more implementation partnerships. But in the past, most EdTech companies have been coached focus on ARR, focus on, selling software. Jennifer, it sounds like so much of what you're leaning into is like professional practice. Would companies be better off approaching this from more of a PD angle, or how do you think implementation works in a K-12 environment?
Well, that's a good question, Ben. I think I would say it's super important to think about who the end user is for the apps that they have. And I say that because, obviously, we're in California, especially, we've got privacy expectations and the agreements they need to sign that we got to work through, pricing pressures everybody talks about. But if we have an app that the teachers are really excited about, but the interoperability isn't there for the web-based platform we use, or they have a proprietary agreement with Clever, but we use ClassLink. It becomes sort of a non-starter because we don't have a programmer who's going to help get that data in. Or if there's a gradebook app we want, but it doesn't work with our LMS, and then suddenly teacher has to enter it in two places, then we're going to have a miss on that, even if we could afford it and they signed the privacy agreement.
Yeah, ironically, these are like age-old challenges that predate AI. But, if your product is AI, a teacher using AI, a student using AI, administrator using AI, also use AI on the back end to create interoperability. Interoperability shouldn't be as hard as what it was before. Okay, so I did promise we were going to talk about mostly AI in practice, but now is our fun part where we get to talk about AI in the future. Over the next, let's time box it over the next 2 years. Use your imagination. Thor here in the comments is talking about, essentially we're in the job of writing our own science fiction here. Given where you see AI impacting your work today, where do you think it could go in the next 2 years? And let's just whip around. And anyone, and Justin, feel free to jump in too here. Where do you think it will be in 2 years, practically?
I see personalized playlists for kids with frequent ongoing feedback in those personalized playlists.
Great. So you immediately go to the personalized learning. Great. Who
So I
else?
see assessments, redesigned for AI native environments. So we are, and I think Leah, you spoke about this when students are doing these projects, or perhaps Joseph, you did. It's really, we know students are going to use AI. We're encouraging it. We're setting up the environment, and our assessments should reflect that. So and I see that becoming more mainstream in the next 2 to 3 years.
I see more modalities being brought for input rather than just text. And I think we'll see some really cool applications for making learning more accessible. The ways that AI can help neurodiverse learners, to help learners with physical limitations. We're just scratching the surface. And I think we'll see some really cool applications in that area.
I'm going to go more than 2 years because I think it's going to take more than 2 years. But I think we're going to see a lot more personal engagement between humans because there's more AI to do the back end. So the teachers aren't stressing out about this kind of grading or that kind of grading or this kind of lesson plan prep and everything else. There's going to be so much more engagement between the students themselves and with their educators. I think it's just going to make us become more connected.
Justin, what are your thoughts?
I think that you're going to see, people talk about this thing called Jevons paradox, where as something gets cheaper, there's more consumption. And I think you're going to see the cost of, artificial intelligence go down, an unbelievable amount, thousands and thousands of, times, I think, with the current level of intelligence over the next 2 years. And so I think you're actually going to see, versus today, the amount of intelligence or AI agents that K-12 or a university is going to run, I'd say will be at least 50,000x what it is today. That would be my guess.
I mean, it's not that hard to imagine everyone having an AI learning agent that is been tasked with helping you learn the things that you want to learn, both in and outside of formal settings, is constantly seeking information on your behalf and is setting up learning experiences for you. And maybe that's not 2 to 3 years out, but 4 or 5 years out, I could imagine us doing that. And it's a routine that I'm consulting with my learning agent when I want to learn more about angel investing. And it's out there finding out what I know and what I don't know and teeing up the next thing for me. And I think I can imagine these crossing over formal and informal settings and being really routine.
All right, and I'm just about to go to Q&A rapid fire. So those of you who are listening, if you have questions, please enter it into the Q&A box. But before we do, we've been pretty optimistic about where things are headed. We've identified some of the challenges. What's the reality check that this audience needs to, as we think about over the next couple of years? What are people going to have to figure out or else? Or what's the worst case if things don't go well or don't go better? I'm just curious from the panelist standpoint, what do you see as the biggest reality checks that you might add for this audience?
I think we're the student safety issue and making sure that we have appropriate guardrails for those early adopter teachers who are, really excited about it and see the thing that Leah said, that they will get to have more interactions with their kids if they have this efficiency tool to help them. But I want to make sure that we don't lose the promise of creativity and human-centered design and only stay in the efficiency space and create guardrails that prevent the early adopters from that enthusiasm.
Yeah, two great points. There's, the safety and compliance, but there's also like, creating a lesson plan is actually an act of real professional creativity and often can help make teachers better at serving students. And if we chalk that up to efficiency, are we actually losing part of the craft of teaching? What do others think? What are other reality checks that the group needs?
I know Jen mentioned safety, but I'm also going to mention fraud. I'm worried about our students' data getting out there. That is another reason some of these individualized systems, if you don't have a walled garden, you can't use it. So I'm worried not just safety, but fraud, people's personal identities and stuff like that. It's just that many more places that it can tunnel out into the world.
I think one that we maybe don't think about as much as we probably should is, right now there's been a pushback on EdTech in schools because of the distraction that can come on the same platform from a different source, right? So our teaching tools are not distracting kids from learning, but YouTube absolutely is, and TikTok absolutely is. And so the public is pushing back generally against technology in schools because they see those downsides and they see them leaking into school settings. And AI has some serious downsides, including students developing relationships with AI as humans when they're not humans. And I think if those things happen with young people and AI outside of school, to the point where society becomes very, very skeptical about what AI is doing to young people, they'll try and pull it out of schools as well.
I agree with my colleagues here. In higher ed, policy, governance, data interoperability is just not keeping up with the way AI is just coming in and evolving. And I'm afraid that unless there is a movement around, shared policy templates or shared data interoperability in higher ed around AI, we'll still be struggling. Larger institutions will be dominant. The smaller or medium-sized institutions will really get left behind. This is one of my concerns.
Yeah, I think the same could be said for medium and small companies too. If you're very large, you can integrate and you can handle this complexity. All right, we're going to jump to rapid fire. So I'll read the question. One of our panelists will take a shot. Those of you who are in the chat, also feel free to add your thoughts. We've got our great EdTech Insiders community here, so everyone can jump in. All right, I'm going to start with the first one. This one probably Jennifer or Leah, this one's probably coming your way. This is from Michelle Chadwa. I would appreciate hearing from the panel, where does informing and engaging parents around child's and teachers' use of AI fit into the plans of districts and products?
I would put stakeholder engagement and a communication plan as one of the top 5 things you need in implementation of AI in your district. We meet regularly with our parent groups, but we can't just go with the people who show up for those meetings. So we're working on ways that we can make sure they understand what we're using, why we're using it, but also giving them a dose of AI literacy themselves.
Yeah,
Oh,
Leah,
that's
anything
great,
to add?
Jen. Yeah, I would just say the other thing that we tend to do is put it in writing and be as transparent as possible. So it's very much open and upfront in the handbooks and everywhere else that we are using AI. That parents should not be surprised by that, because to Jen's point, every parent's engaged slightly differently. And so we just want to make sure that our bases are covered.
Great. Miriam Gross asked, do we see institutions adopting multiple tools or focusing on the bigger providers like Brisk Magic School that can do more, even if not as precisely? Thinking of companies like Snorkel that are great at one thing, but they will be lost along the way, question mark?
Generally, I'm seeing schools gravitate towards the larger providers. It's familiar to them. It feels safer to them. It feels like they'll be around for a long time. And I agree that some innovation is going to be left on the side because of that. I think if you are a specialized provider, then you need to be really specialized and do something that these larger organizations won't bother investing in, that is also vital for schools. So it's a really tight target that you're shooting at if you're going to survive as a smaller offering.
Justin, are we hearing any or seeing any data about that, whether people are willing to actually pilot multiple competing products, or they're looking at a portfolio, or are they kind of going all in with one?
I think you're seeing a combination of both in that the number of companies that are entering the space is probably 5x from at least what we see. The number of new education technology startups is probably 5x as it was in maybe a 2022. And many of those companies are doing well. And at the same time, it can be true that the biggest companies are capturing a huge percentage of the revenue share. My overall suggestion would be, and I think it goes back to having amazing partnerships with the vendors that you work with and really getting to know them, I think will kind of stand the test of time. And you should do your own diligence about not just the state of the product, but the person and the team who's behind it and the vision for that company. And I think that can't go wrong.
Yeah, my 2 cents on this, and I could totally be wrong, but I think there's lack of defensibility in most AI tooling in that others can fast follow. And if you're a large company, you have a distribution advantage. So those companies that really do get defensibility, they understand particular use cases quite well. An old school example would be Elevation, ELL Elevation. They work with English language learning students and created curriculum and products very, very specific to that niche. And now we have all these niches in K-12 and higher ed that had never been served. At Oklahoma University, there's a large Native American population. That's too small of a TAM traditionally to serve with a venture-backed company. Now, if you can build with AI and keep your team lean, you can actually focus on learner subgroups and kind of reach the vision that Jennifer shared, where each learner themselves has like a combination of tools that really personalize for them.
If I
All
could
right,
add
next
one.
question. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, if I could add one thing, Ben, the one thing I would encourage folks though is that when what I found is that when a district leader or when a higher education leader is one of the earliest adopters and gets to co-create the vision of a company that ends up becoming one that makes a large impact on the entire ecosystem, it can be one of the most fruitful things that I think happens in folks' career. When people took a bet on me in my first company, folks, I still talk to today say that was one of the best things I did in my professional career. And so I'd say that while I think it can both be true that some companies are in less defensible positions, and it can also be true that I think if you end up really connecting with a company and you feel like they really empathize with your challenges, that it can be one of the most fruitful things to get to be one of those early partners as well. Yeah.
All right, 2 more questions. Anthony DeLuis. I'm curious to hear the panel's thought on tools that live outside a school or university's guardrail. Gasp, they are using tools outside of our guardrails. He mentions persistent autonomous agents like OpenClaw, and then there was the announcement of a homework agent that's been in the news this week. How are you thinking about the things that students are using outside of your purview? And is that in your zone of thinking or responsibility? What's your approach? Open to the panel.
Yeah, I'll start from a higher ed standpoint. Students are absolutely using all of the open tools out there, specifically in higher ed. So I think we know this, and it's inconsistent across the institution, even within an institution, across institutions, is how we're steering students towards the use of these tools. So it's not that we don't know they're using them or would discourage that. But it's really how do we adapt? So I think that's where the struggle is. How does the institution adapt? How does learning adapt? We're behind on that.
I think this comes into the AI literacy. Obviously, we want to make sure our kids know they should cite their sources. I think the previous conversation about stakeholder engagement, make sure parents know what Joseph is cautioning us about is the, friendships that they're developing in those spaces, especially at TK8, because telling what's real and what's not real will be super important for the children and for their parents.
Yeah, super helpful to hear your perspectives. I think this is also one that is dynamically evolving too as we talk about it. All right, I've got one. I have several other great questions, but not enough time. So Mital Shah asks, are you seeing school districts and universities move towards supporting their purchasing decisions with evidence, i.e. ESSA tiers and tiered evidence? that account for implementation support, and beyond simple procurement, what measures of success beyond just usage are public sector leaders actually putting into their strategic plans to ensure that AI moves from a line item to a learning game? Love that you're bringing us back to our learning games, Mital. Team, what do you think?
I think the evidence hasn't been there in droves like we'd like it to, but it is starting to become more of the forefront. So when Justin and others are talking about moving to the big players, they are usually the ones who are investing in the research and actually have data to show improvement gains across a certain population or something. And I do think that's going to become a much higher priority versus the piloting. I think that's going to be a big shift over the next year or two.
One thing we're working hard on is evaluating all the current, EdTech tools that we have out there, because there was such rapid adoption during distance learning and learning from home. And so then making sure that we use, our trusted friends. Like I think Common Sense Media has some good tools. ISTE has good rubrics. But it is true that we're going to lean on the trusted ones, but then meanwhile looking back and making sure that anything we're using, that we have some rigor in how we made that choice.
I would just say evidence and verification takes time, and we are moving so fast, not much time has passed. So we either need to create methodologies that gather evidence much more quickly, or we need to develop some patience to allow that evidence to mature.
Yeah, one thing that I'm seeing is that people are adopting AI tools and saying, we're adopting an AI tool, rather than, for example, Sonam, you were talking about assessment and how excited you are about that. Setting goals around where do we want to see assessment? Okay, let's talk about assessment. What would the tools be that we could use? And then you're measuring your progress towards an instructional goal and choosing the tools that support that, rather than starting with the tool itself and saying, well, what would determine whether that's successful or not? I have some bias because our EdTech Insider maps are all based on use cases rather than starting with the tools. I would be remiss if I didn't say a huge, huge thank you to everyone on this panel. And you've been so candid. And for those of you who want to reach out, please put your LinkedIn in the webinar chat. It's been so gratifying just to hear this great conversation. Justin and Starbridge, thank you so much for sponsoring this webinar. It's sponsors like you that help us bring this community together. So thank you so much, Justin. And then for everyone who's attended, please scan this. Give us feedback. We want to know what other topics you want to hear, what other ideas you have. And if you'd like to join the conversation in our WhatsApp, our after hours, please join EdTech Insiders Plus. That's through our Substack. It's been awesome. I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you, everyone, for joining today.